Spotlight.
Welcome to another episode of The Spotlight on the Hacker State, and I'm your host Karthik Palapaka, and we have a very special guest today, Miss Sramana Mitra. Sramana is a serial entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. She's doing her fourth company right now as the founder CEO of 1mby1m, and she's been doing this for the past 6 years now. So 1mby1m is the first global virtual accelerator out of Silicon Valley with a mission to help 1 million entrepreneurs reach $1 million and beyond in annual revenue. Oh, wow, there's just so many millions in there. Hi, Sramana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. So you were born into a family of eminent lawyers and distinguished judges. However, you moved to the US in the late 80s and pursued a Bachelor's of Science in computer science. How did that happen? Was that a conscious decision on your end?
Actually, I had a cousin. This is, I'm talking about the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s when I was a teenager in Calcutta. My father is an entrepreneur, so he was a shipping entrepreneur, and I had already made up my mind by 16 that I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I hadn't yet, at 16, I hadn't yet discovered the path of computer science. But I had a cousin who went to study at London School of Economics in '84, and I was about 13, and he was kind of sending me back signals that you should study computer science. So I, I took a computer class right after my 10th exam, and I found it fun, and then I decided to pursue computer science full blast.
So it was all completely your idea. It was not your father wanting you to do something. Wow, that's great.
Actually, nothing in what I have become is because my father wanted me to be something or my mother wanted to be something. It was all generative. But the thing that my parents were incredibly good. When I look back on their parenting skills or parenting, sophistication, I would say, they were very thoughtful in how they groomed me. They gave me infinite liberty, no pressure, but immense opportunity. So that combination of, I was not only, academically pretty good, I had a lot of exposure to the arts. I studied with an eminent Indian artist called Ramananda Bandapathy for watercolor painting. I studied dance all the way till the end. I played the piano all the way till I left India. So it was a very, and I read voraciously. One of the reasons I'm a good writer is because I'm extremely well read.
Wow, that's great information right there. We knew that you're an entrepreneur and you're doing a lot of help in this ecosystem, but we didn't know that you're a pianist. Wow, that's amazing.
I'm not a pianist. I studied piano very long ago. I'm still a painter though.
Fantastic. There you go. So you founded your first company in 1994. Am I right?
Yes, I was still a graduate student at MIT.
Right.
And one day I was sitting in my office at MIT. I still remember Tech Square. The office number of 630 was 632 in our building, and on the lower floors were the laboratory for computer science, and the upper floors were the AI lab. And I had two office mates, and I turned around one day and Ken said, "Sramana, have you seen Mosaic yet?" And I'm like, "What is Mosaic?" And in 1994, Netscape went public, and our whole world changed, just literally before my eyes.
Right.
And it was thrilling, absolutely.
But it seems
First company.
It seems like a lifetime away, doesn't it?
Does I feel old?
And there was no internet. Nowadays, it's like ubiquitous. I mean, you cannot imagine a world without internet. But back then, 1994, it was just getting started. Even in the US, I don't think there's a lot of information available for the startups or anything like that. How did it feel?
I'll tell you a story if you're interested. I was in Bombay.
Please, by all means.
In 1995, I think it was. I think it was 1995 or maybe early 96. And Shammi Kapoor on stage was selling the concept of the internet. And he was explaining to people how to use the internet and what benefits you can get out of the internet. And one of the things he said was, "Oh, and women can find recipes on the internet." So I raised my hand and I stood up and I said, "Women do a lot of other things than looking for recipes on the internet." And then I think Pradip Gupta, who was the CEO of Cyber Media, was sitting next to him, or somebody was sitting next to him, who leaned over to Shami Kapoor and pointed out, "Is like, that is the first female CEO of the Indian IT industry." So Shami Kapoor then engaged with me in that conference.
Wow, that's great. I think there are two very interesting things in that story, right? One is that you have to learn about internet from Shami Kapoor, and two is that two is that Indian women entrepreneurs uh, are there to go get the world from the very beginning of this IT revolution that's happening in India. That's a great story. I love it. Um, would you agree that entrepreneurs then had to solve a lot more problems back then than now? And do you think has internet and the evolution of the ecosystem in general had made things easy for startups to start early?
Hugely, hugely, on many dimensions. First and foremost, it's a lot cheaper to start companies today just because technology has become a lot cheaper. Everything was much more expensive then. My journey was particularly complicated because at that time, I also had taken upon myself the mission of trying to turn the Calcutta, non-existent IT industry into something meaningful. So I did my India operation for the first company in Calcutta, first two companies in Calcutta. And that was much harder because at the time, getting a phone line in Calcutta was difficult. So
Right.
I didn't have a landline. We had to go upstairs to the BSNL office to send faxes. And that's just put too much, you know, uh, sand in the gear. So at some point I said, okay, this is not the point of my career where I should be doing this. I need to learn, I need mentors, I need to work with people who know what they're doing. And that's when I switched to Silicon Valley. I moved to Silicon Valley at the end of '96.
So the first message out there to all the entrepreneurs out there is such a thing called landline, and people used to die for that because it was so difficult to get a landline in India back then.
Before cellular telephony, yeah.
So you've been, is it right to say that you've been working with startups for almost 2 decades now, in various
Yeah,
capacities?
yeah, in various capacities, 2 decades, yeah.
And you're exposed to both sides of it, right? I mean, you've been an entrepreneur, but you also advise a lot of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, correct?
Yes, the years that I consulted heavily, 10 years, I worked on both sides of the table intensely.
Right. So my question is two-part. One is, do you think there's a lot of difference between the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem and the Silicon Valley-based ecosystem? And the second question is, how did you see the venture capital itself evolve over these 2 decades?
So let's take the Indian ecosystem question first.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've been doing this long enough, but I started writing my blog in 2005. And that's already 12 years ago, right?
Right.
And again, one of my key goals at the time as I was writing the blog was to engage an Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem. So I had a very big readership in the Indian entrepreneur ecosystem. And I kept writing about the fact that India needs to move from services companies to product companies. And that shift has started happening in a pretty significant way at this point. But the time frame that I'm talking about when I started evangelizing that was very long ago. And very few of us were doing that at the time.
Right.
Now, if you go back to my 2008, I think February Forbes article, "The Coming Death of Indian Outsourcing," I called that in the next decade or so, Indian outsourcing is going to falter, and it is faltering right now. Which was one of the reasons I think India needed to shift to the product ecosystem. And I think now the pressures are even more significant because AI has actually taken off, which was not the case 10 years ago. So that's kind of like the backdrop of the Indian technology ecosystem. As far as Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem, at the time, there was quite a lot of what I call concept arbitrage going on. And I encourage that concept arbitrage because I think, you kind of have to learn to walk before you can run. So Indian entrepreneurs were coming out of having worked for services companies only. They had not really worked for product companies. There was not a lot of product management talent, product marketing talent. All that was, very nascent. So I think it was okay to do some concept arbitrage. And if you look at the companies that have really taken off, they are a bit of a concept arbitrage companies. From our portfolio, Freshdesk, for instance, Freshdesk is not an original concept. Freshdesk is a concept arbitrage. It basically copied what Zendesk was doing, did it cheaper, faster, better.
Correct.
Better, it was better or not, but at least they did a very, very nice job of building a significant company based on that premise and the premise of Zoho, which is, Zoho did all the software development in India and managed to build a huge company in the United States selling to global customers. So that those models, I think, started gaining ground. And if you go back to my earlier writings of when Freshdesk was launched and brought to market, I actually pushed this trend of software-enabled services companies from India, where you can actually sell on the phone, close deals on the phone, or acquire customers online, where you don't have the big Silicon Valley overhead and all that. All those trends have now gained ground. So there's been a tremendous amount of maturity that has happened in the Indian ecosystem. Coming to the venture capital side, let's start at the main problem that has happened in the last 5 years in the US, and the Indian VCs have copied this problem, which is unicorn mania. I'm a very big critique of unicorn mania, because unicorn mania is an unhealthy thing where you're trying to get this ridiculous valuation without the fundamentals often. Some unicorns do have fundamentals, but there are a lot of unicorns that do not have fundamentals. And I think this trend of overfunding companies without fundamentals has carried over to India as well, and this is an unhealthy trend as far as I'm concerned. I am more a fan of, whether it's in India or in Silicon Valley, I'm much more of a fan of capital efficient companies that build with a close eye towards fundamentals. And that's what we teach in the philosophy and the methodology of the 1 million by 1 million program. So, we teach how to put one foot before the other to the entrepreneurs. And in that, the way we do that is very much like focus on customers, not investors. Entrepreneurship equals customers, revenues, and profits. Financing is optional. Exit is optional. Exit is a must if you raise financing, unless you have investors who are willing to work with a dividend model. But overall, our focus is very much in the capital efficient domain. The good news is, if you can make things work in a capital efficient way, in a bootstrap way or with little financing, and get to a robust, product market fit and a business that has velocity, raising financing is a walk in the park. Absolutely. No problem. There's too much money in the ecosystem looking for good deals to invest in. So it's no problem at all. And that is the point where investors are going to be chasing entrepreneurs. So again, you would hear me say this all the time. It's everywhere in my writings. Do not go to VCs as beggars, go as kings.
So you founded 1 million by 1 million. I mean, the sheer scale of this audacious goal is bound to shock people. Tell us, what was the thought process behind this?
Well, we talked earlier about my working on both sides of the table, the venture capital side as well as an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur multiple times. As I went through that, I realized that there were a lot of good companies based on good premises who are hung up on the idea of venture capital. People have confused entrepreneurship with venture capital, with financing. And I felt like, venture capital is when I'm doing due diligence on a company, is this venture fundable? Should my VC colleagues fund this company? I'm often going back and telling them no, because what is the problem with this company? The problem is either it doesn't seem to have the scope in terms of TAM, total available market. It is not a large enough business opportunity, or it doesn't have velocity. VCs want to go from $0 to $100 million in 5 to 7 years. That means you have to have an incredible amount of velocity in your business, incredible amount of market adoption pace, which if you don't have that, then there's no point raising venture capital. So in that scenario, you become quote unquote a failure in the minds of a lot of entrepreneurs. But that couldn't be far from the truth. You could have the material in your idea, in your concept, to build a company that will grow organically, that will grow linearly. It will not grow exponentially, but it will grow linearly and become a very successful, profitable, sustainable company. You could go from 0 to 5 million in 5 years, or 0 to 15 million in 7 years. And those, if you build a profitable company with a good set of customers and a nice set of employees, that is a success, not a failure. And that is what the ecosystem has confused completely. And it has drunk this Kool-Aid of venture capital, venture capital, venture capital. And I decided that I was going to set that right. That's 1 million by 1 million.
That's excellent. But here is a startling statistic. Like 90% of all the startups in India, from the time they start, within 5 years, they shut their shop down. I think it's more or less the same applies to American startups as well. So does that really concern you in achieving this goal of 1 million?
Well, one of the stated goals early on in 1 million by 1 million, if you go back to my New Year resolution in the year 2010, where I declared that I was going to do 1 million by 1 million, it talks about reducing infant mortality rate. So one of the causes of infant mortality rates, I studied extensively the causes of infant mortality rate, infant entrepreneur mortality rate, is chasing money instead of customers, in financing instead of customers. When you start a company, if you have very limited runway and very limited resources, right? And resources includes your own emotional energy, your own physical energy, your ability to work. All of that is part of that runway. If you exhaust all that in chasing investors and constantly get rejected, at some point you get disappointed, you get basically discouraged, and you shut up shop. And that happens a lot. Instead, if that time that you're working on, the thing that we have been able to do with 1 million by 1 million is nip a lot of bad ideas in the bud by using our methodology. A lot of bad ideas do get pursued that will never get financed, but worse still, that will also never get customer traction or adoption. So what we do very, very deeply and early in our cycle is immerse in customer validation methodologies. So that customer validation methodology process either validates your idea or invalidates your idea. And if it invalidates your idea based on market feedback, then we encourage you to move on to your next idea instead of spending 2 years spinning in place. You won't get anywhere. You're going to spin in place. You're going to burn up all your energy, all your resources, all the funds, personal funds that you have available to make this happen. And that's not a good outcome. So in that format, actually, we've had great success in being able to move an entrepreneur from a bad idea to a good idea. And as they're learning the methodology of 1 million by 1 million, they are able to come up with good ideas. And that's incredibly satisfying to see. I have also said that entrepreneurial energy is precious, like air, water. It's precious, and we need to conserve that energy and try to turn that energy into productive companies, as opposed to let it wither and let it dwindle.
I think that's a great format for entrepreneurs across the world. But there you are in Silicon Valley, and there are so many Indian entrepreneurs living in India, right? How can they reach you, and how can you guarantee that every entrepreneur, no matter where he is, no matter where she is, have the same level of access to the mentors, the partners, the roundtables that happen at 1M by 1M? How can you ensure that?
We have had tremendous actually adoption in the Indian ecosystem. Every roundtable, we do these free mentoring roundtables every Thursday morning that entrepreneurs from all over the world come to. Every session there's an Indian contingent that pitches, participates, and so forth. So it's very easy. You dial into a WebEx call basically, and you have the videos and the slides on your screen, and you participate, and it couldn't be easier, to access this. So you get plugged into Silicon Valley right from wherever you are. And one of my favorite stories on this is one day at one of these roundtables, there was a first-year college student from Siliguri, which is a small town in the foothills of the Himalayas near Darjeeling. And this kid had an idea that he wanted to do some sort of a small business delivery service using an Uber-like technology. And that kind of made my day, I was like, oh, great. You come up with a decent idea. You're savvy enough to find 1 million by 1 million and plug into Silicon Valley, and you're pitching to me. This is why I founded 1 million by 1 million. So, anybody can do that, and it's very easy to do. Then in the premium program, or we have also 1mby1m basic, through which you can access the curriculum, the 1mby1m methodology. It's an online curriculum, video lectures and case study based. What we've been able to do is engage over 750 successful entrepreneurs all over the world, and hugely from Silicon Valley. Lots of Indian entrepreneurs, including Indian entrepreneurs in India, have basically shared their journeys, shared their case studies in a lot of detail. And I have been able to, both access them and bring them here to you and kind of simulate this experience. Let's say you had the opportunity to go sit down and have coffee with 750 plus of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. How much would you learn from that? That's what was going on in my mind when I created or launched the journey of creating this. Today, this has been a much bigger effort. We have a whole team working on this and so forth. So we have this incredible repository of journeys, and we have taken the lessons from those trenches, synthesized them into methodology. So it's a very powerful resource. 50 plus unicorn entrepreneurs, really unicorn entrepreneurs, 400 plus venture funded entrepreneurs, 300 plus bootstrap success stories. You have a lot to learn from these people.
I know you touched on the Freshdesk example earlier on. It was one of the high-profile business successes coming out of 1mby1m. I think the other example is Happy Grasshopper, which is, I believe, close to more than $4 million revenue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Very different style of entrepreneurship. Yes.
Right. So that's exactly my question. Like, do these entrepreneurs use the resources that 1mby1m provide differently from those who are maybe less successful?
No, so I don't think Happy Grasshopper is less successful than Girish Mathrubootham. Happy Grasshopper wanted to bootstrap. There are entrepreneurs who want to bootstrap. Dan Stewart, who's the CEO of Happy Grasshopper, wanted to bootstrap. Vikrant Mathur, CEO of iFood.tv, wanted to bootstrap. And these are both companies that are over $4 million in revenue.
Right.
And that's a different journey. The journey of a bootstrapped entrepreneur is a different journey. Girish is one of those entrepreneurs who really wanted to scale very fast, and he wanted to raise lots of money. He has raised close to $150 million. So that's a very different method of building a company. So at the end of the day, if you look at personal wealth creation, one of my favorite examples is that a bootstrap entrepreneur who, let's say, makes $5 million and sells the company for $25 million keeps the entire $25 million. Whereas if you have a company that is heavily venture funded, you may have raised a lot of venture capital. The entrepreneur may still end up with $25 million and no more than that, because there are so many other people who are sharing that pot of gold. Especially if you have liquidation preferences, entrepreneurs often end up making very little money. I mean, little is all relative, but relatively speaking, often make. But like Sridhar Vembu is the one who has actually completely bootstrapped, and they're
Right.
in the $500 million kind of trajectory next year in revenue. So if you actually valued the company, Sridhar has no intention or no interest in going public or anything. But if you did go public, that company would be valued at $10 billion probably today.
Right. I don't mean to suggest that Happy Grasshopper was less successful. $4 million is a lot of money. I would love to have that kind of revenue with my business if I had one. So tell us how one can apply for this program. Is this open only to tech entrepreneurs, or is it open to any entrepreneur? And these format and the curriculum that comes with 1m can be applied by anybody.
So it is tech and tech-enabled services only. So if you're doing solar energy, for instance, we are not the right accelerator for you. There are accelerators who will help you with clean tech ventures and so forth, but we are not that. Biotech is not our sweet spot. We only work with tech and tech-enabled services. Now, tech-enabled services is pretty broad. If you're doing healthcare IT, that falls within our scope. If you're doing energy IT, that falls within our scope. So there's everything to do with IT falls within our scope. As far as applying, as long as you fall within that constraints, tech and tech-enabled services, anybody can join 1 million by 1 million. You can start with the free roundtables that happen every week. So all through September, October, there are Thursday morning roundtables, and pretty much across the year, we probably do 48 roundtables. Maybe there are 3 or 4 Thursdays in the year that we are not there because, we're taking a bit of break. But, 48 out of the 52 roundtables, you'll find us there. Thursdays, you'll find us with a roundtable.
Right.
And that's the free option. There's ton of material out there, content that you can follow. The blog is free. There are 12 volumes of Entrepreneur Journeys books that you can follow. Those are very, very reasonably priced, and they double click down on different topics. Like you could be doing bootstrapping with a paycheck. There is a book on bootstrapping with a paycheck that you can learn from people who have done that with methodology, etc. You can study billion-dollar unicorns and what my analysis of that phenomenon is in a book, so on and so forth. So that's another body of material that people are learning from. 1m Basic is our curriculum only option, which offers you the entire 1m curriculum, which is over 300 hours worth of material, 750 plus case studies, plus all these video lectures where you get to interface with people kind of in the simulated environment and learn from them, learn methodology and so forth. 1m Premium is our full acceleration program. That is an annual membership fee-based program, $1,000 annual membership fee. And you get the full curriculum. You get private roundtable coaching. This is the big thing that everybody is excited about, is that you actually get project coaching in our private roundtables, and it's phenomenally effective.
Right. I've actually
he has done a lot of those.
I've actually read some of the testimonials from Girish and other entrepreneurs who actually took that. It sounds very interesting. So I know.
In Premium, you have an unlimited number of introductions. You can get introduced to customers, channel partners, investors, media, analysts, other advisors that you want to access. My entire phenomenal network is at your disposal if you want to be in 1m Premium.
Right. I don't think you can put a price tag on that. So I know that we're running out of time, but I cannot let you go before I get to my favorite part of the interview, which is the rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you quick questions and hopefully, expect quick answers from you. So some of them could be a curveball sort of question. So you are forewarned. Who is your mentor?
My first mentor was my father. He gave me lots of stimulation, input, and was a great role model growing up. Risk was part of my psyche because I grew up as an entrepreneur's daughter. Okay. And then I had others along the way, good ones, very good ones.
Would you like to name a few?
Yeah, my professor of computer science at Smith College, Dominique Thibault, was a fabulous mentor. My professor at MIT, Anand Agarwal, was a fabulous mentor. Then I had a mentor, also a very close friend, who was on the board of 2 of my companies, David Chen, Gus Tai, a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, a very close friend, one of my best friends actually in the ecosystem, also was a great mentor. And then Joe Costello, former CEO of Cadence, who built Cadence from very little to $1 billion company, is somebody I worked for as a turnaround opportunity when he was running Think3, and I was his interim VP of worldwide marketing for about 9 months, and that was my first major turnaround experience. It was a great mentor. So those are a few.
Great. So in Bangalore, we have crazy traffic, so our commutes are very, very long. So if I'm in Uber getting to work, what is one book that you would recommend me read?
You can read a book. You can, I would actually suggest you read Bootstrapping with a Paycheck, because in India that would be the most effective one. There are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of great technology professionals who can use that very effectively. But I would also point you to our new podcast channel. We launched a podcast channel in May, and a lot of the talk show interviews from the roundtables have been released as podcasts. So load up your phone with a bunch of podcasts and listen to a couple every day, and you will get through, probably 80, 90 podcasts, and you cannot learn more than that in that time.
I think you just answered my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you about a blog or newsletter that you follow, but I think we can substitute that with a podcast. But what do you think of investing in idea stage companies?
So I think idea stage companies need to be bootstrapped, and ideally, customer money should be funding idea stage companies. There aren't that many investors who are investing in idea stage companies. So if you start out with the mentality that you're going to get your idea stage company funded, it's probably not going to work.
So my next question, I have to be honest with you. I stole this question from one of my favorite podcasts of Harry Stubbings, 20 Minutes of VC. He often asks, what do you believe that most around you disbelieve? So I'm going to ask the same question. What do you believe that most around you disbelieve?
Excess is not a requirement for success.
Wow. Do you think public companies can innovate?
Yes, public companies can innovate. We have a very interesting intrapreneurship corporate incubation program that we do with various companies. Our biggest success is with Oracle. We run on the 1mby1m platform, huge part of Oracle's intrapreneurship program, and it's been a very successful effort.
My next question is coming from one of my associates. What is one tipping point in your career so far?
I would say the great tipping point was coming up with the idea of 1mby1m. I had a very big surgery at the end of 2009, and when I was recovering from that surgery, I had a lot of time to just basically sit around and think, and that's the point at which 1mby1m organically came up for me. And that is a very big tipping point. A very big inflection point in my career was getting fired from Intarka, which was my own company that I had raised venture capital from NEA.
Wow.
And I got kicked out, and I was basically, I didn't have a great visa situation, and if you know anything about the US visa system, it puts you in a very vulnerable spot. So building myself up from that setback was emotionally, psychologically a very, very tough exercise.
I wish we had more time to talk about that. That seems like a very interesting story that a lot of people could learn from. I know we're running out of time. One last question. When were you last time in Bangalore, and when can we expect you again to be in Bangalore?
At some level, I'm in Bangalore every week because there are people from Bangalore coming to the roundtables every Thursday, and I'm talking to entrepreneurs from Bangalore all the time. So, because I have this, scalable entrepreneurship development vision, will find me anytime you want every Thursday and come talk to me. Please come talk to me. I'm available to you. I'm one of the most accessible people in the world in this ecosystem. So I'm here to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I want to work with you. And these Thursday roundtables are working sessions. I want to work on your businesses. So that is my answer to your question.
Guys, I can vouch for that. She is one of the most accessible people ever. There is no doubt about that. I cannot finish this interview without thanking Maureen Kelly, who helped set up this interview. Thank you so much, Maureen. And Shramana, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I hope you had some fun.
I did, likewise. Best of luck to all of you, what you're doing, and let's keep working on the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shramana.
Bye-bye.
Bye.